Hi, everybody, and welcome to Pac-12 Chalk Talk, your source for everything Pac-12 sports. I'm Austin Controls, and this week on Chalk Talk, we're discussing the Pac-12 football season as a whole. As always, in studio tonight, we have Ben Haber, Pierce Bly, and Robbie Baker. Also joining us throughout the show tonight by phone is the University of Arizona beat writer and Pac-12 blogger, Ryan Finley. All right, guys, let's dive right in. The first thing we need to address as we wrap up the Pac-12 football season is the first ever Pac-12 championship game that was played last weekend between the Oregon Ducks and the UCLA Bruins. What are your thoughts on the Ducks' 49-31 win over UCLA? And as a follow-up, what are your projections for Oregon's next bowl game, the Rose Bowl? Ryan, start us off.
Oh, it was terrible. I mean, I think you'd agree with me. You want to see competitive conference championship games all the time, regardless of what you think of them. UCLA played well for Rick Neuheisel for about a half, and then Oregon's speed took over. And, they prove week after week, year after year, that scheme, as funny as it looks sometimes, is among the best and the toughest to defend in football. I think Oregon has evolved from a good to a great football program, and will continue to represent the Pac-12 in the West fairly well going forward.
UCLA kept it a lot closer than I thought, guys. Only an 18-point loss. Robbie, I know you weren't watching. You were watching the Grinch. But it was a good game. Oregon had 2 turnovers early that kept UCLA involved in the game. They really ran the ball well. But at the end of the day, Oregon's speed was way too much for UCLA to handle. They couldn't stop them, and that's the reason why they lost. We'll talk about the Rose Bowl in a second, guys.
Yeah, I'll give UCLA a lot of credit for this game. Obviously, after going down 50-0 to USC the past week, I thought Oregon was going to run all over them. 49-31 is not a bad loss for UCLA, though. Obviously, they're getting rid of Rick Neuheisel, trying to figure out who's going to be taking over that coaching spot. The interception for a TD in the first quarter was huge for the Bruins' momentum. They were just never able to build anything else offensively.
Yeah, and I was impressed that UCLA put up the amount of points they did after being shut out to USC just a week earlier. But Oregon is a better football team. Obviously, you look at the highlights. Huge hit here, forced a fumble. Oregon forced 4 turnovers in this game. But guys, looking ahead to this Rose Bowl, Wisconsin ranks 6th in the country in points against. They only allow about 17 points per game allowed, so they have a very stout defense. Oregon is a fast team. They have a lot of skill, but this is going to be a big Big Ten football team they're going up against, and it's going to be a big game and a big test for the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be a shootout, in my opinion. Russell Wilson, Monty Ball, big playmakers for the Badgers. They're going to be going up against, obviously, LaMichael James, Darren Thomas, DeAnthony Thomas, and Kenyon Barner. I picture a really big shootout in this game. I don't know about you guys. Wisconsin has struggled against quick offenses in the past, obviously losing on Hail Marys to Michigan State and Ohio State earlier this year. I expect Oregon to get the W in this.
One thing I like about Wisconsin over Oregon is the defensive side of the ball, as Robbie talked about, 6th in the country compared to Oregon, who's 48th in the country. So at the end of the day, they may be able to get that key stop they need to win the game. I think the running games are very similar with Monty Ball and LaMichael James. Quarterback-wise, you got to give it to Russell Wilson over Darren Thomas. So at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Wisconsin.
Now, along with all conference teams recently being announced, Heisman finalists were also just announced. Now, guys, we have consistently discussed quarterbacks Matt Barkley and Andrew Luck on this show. Matt Barkley posted very similar numbers to Andrew Luck this year, but he isn't a Heisman finalist. Pierce, what quarterback do you expect to be better at the next level and why?
I definitely expect Andrew Luck to be better at the next level. I'm glad that we are talking about Matt Barkley instead of Nick Foles, saying that I said he was the second best all year long. But I do think that Andrew Luck is going to be better in the pros. Andrew Luck put up pretty similar numbers this year and last year with pretty mediocre wide receivers and offensive line. Matt Barkley had the luxury this year of being able to throw to Marquise Lee and Robert Woods, 2 very prolific wide receivers. But I think if you give Andrew Luck a pro-caliber wide receiving core, that he would blow Matt Barkley out of the water.
Yeah, and I think the reason that Andrew Luck, I'll agree, and I think the reason he will be better is just for what Pierce said. He didn't have really anybody around him. Matt Barkley had a lot of weapons surrounding him. Andrew Luck really didn't have anybody, I guess, unless you consider Griff Whalen a big target. He put up huge stats. He had 117 passer rating, 3,170 yards, 35 touchdowns, only 9 interceptions. Huge numbers for a guy that really didn't have any weapons around him.
I'm going to take Andrew Luck also. On the contrary, though, Matt Barkley does have a bigger arm. We got to remember that. That translates over to the NFL well. But the reason why I stick with Luck is because he's more experienced. He's played the big-time games. Barkley, in his one true meaningful season, his team was under suspension. So really, anything he did this year almost didn't even matter.
You think Barkley should come back, though, next year?
If he
Because they could play in a bowl next year.
He could.
He could. They would be a national championship contender if he did so.
And let's not be wrong. Matt Barkley is going to be great at the next level, just not as good as Andrew Luck.
I'll be honest with you. I said in my Heisman Trophy ballot yesterday, and I had Andrew Luck #1 and Matt Barkley #2. I'm fairly certain that those were the two best players in America this year. And that said, I'm not sure either one of them is going to be unsuccessful at the next level. That said, I would take Andrew Luck 10 times out of 10. He has more physical tools. He's a little bit taller. He's a guy who certainly has proven for the last 2 seasons that he can run a complex NFL-style offense basically on his own. I mean, this guy called 40% of his own plays this season. I think that speaks to something. Andrew Luck is going to be a superstar in the NFL.
This season, the balance of power in the Pac-12 clearly favors the North over the South. Will this be a continued theme for years to come? Ryan, what are your thoughts on the North versus the South futuristically?
With USC getting off probation, with Arizona State and Arizona hiring new coaches, Utah certainly proved last year that they were a good quarterback away from winning their division. Colorado is getting better and better and better. And UCLA, you have to think at some point we'll figure it all out. This is going to be a competitive league. Don't let one bad, really weird, funny season throw you off. I mean, if ASU doesn't just fall on its face the final 2 games of the year, they're representing the league in the conference championship game. If Utah has a quarterback who can complete a pass, they're winning their division and playing in the conference championship game. And if USC was on probation, they would be ranked in the top 4 or 5 nationally, and probably going to a major BCS caliber bowl game. So certainly no, don't tell me that the Pac-12 South is slipping. It certainly is not. It was just one bad year, and I think that heading forward, it's going to be a pretty equally split conference in terms of talent and football programs, and certainly that's why they drew it up the way they did, was so things could be equal between North and South.
Yeah, the balance of power is going to be in favor of the North, in my opinion, for a long time. Stanford does lose Andrew Luck. They'll still be a decent football team. Oregon is going to be a powerhouse for a very long time. The South is going over some major coaching overhauls. If you look at UCLA, Arizona State still doesn't have a coach. Mike Leach also going to Washington State, up a team that's in the North Division. The North will be in power, I guess, for a long time, in my opinion.
I'd agree with you for the next couple of years. I think they'll still be in power. Oregon obviously will have a big advantage recruiting-wise in the North. Stanford might struggle a little bit with Andrew Luck leaving. But I think with 3 new head coaches coming into the Pac-12 South at UCLA, ASU, and University of Arizona with Rich Rodriguez, those programs are trying to find a new identity, trying to booster their program. I think they will actually be able to challenge, and also once the USC is taken off of sanctions, I think they'll be able to challenge for a conference title every year.
I like the North also. I think they are overall better. I say Oregon and USC are going to cancel each other out for the next 5 to 10 years. Both programs headed in the right direction. USC, after the probation, they'll be back on track. But the North is just deeper at the end of the day. Wazoo is probably the weakest team in that conference, and obviously Mike Leach is going to turn it around. They don't have a Boulder in that conference. So I think the North is going to continue to develop. Cal has a great recruiting class with Zach Klein, one of the top recruits at quarterback position coming in. So I think Cal is going to even start to move up.
Now, all season long, we've asked you guys to pick a player of the week on both sides of the ball. Now, as we wrap up football, who were your picks as players of the year? We'll start with offense, and Pierce, who'd you pick?
I went with the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year. Easy pick for me, Andrew Luck. Over 3,000 yards, 35 touchdowns. Obviously not as good of numbers as Matt Barkley, as you see right there. But let's remember that before Andrew Luck became quarterback, Stanford had never had an 11-game winning season. That happened twice in the past 2 years while Andrew Luck was at the helm. And Stanford wasn't even able to do that with some guy named John Elway, if you guys know who that is. Luck this year also broke the Stanford career record for TDs, previously held by Elway, and also broke his own single-season record for touchdowns that he set last year.
And I went with LaMichael James. LaMichael James this season, the one word to describe his performance is he was a manimal. He was half man, half animal. You look at the stats he put up. He had 1,646 yards on the ground, 17 touchdowns, and those stats were put up with him missing games because of his elbow injury. This kid had an amazing season, and he will also be, like Andrew Luck we mentioned earlier and Matt Barkley, he will also be a big-time player at the next level.
Both those guys had great seasons, but I'm going to talk about the guy that broke all the records, and that's Matt Barkley. He had more touchdown passes than Andrew Luck, he had more yards than Andrew Luck, and he had fewer interceptions than Andrew Luck. That, to me, translates to a better year. I really like what Barkley was able to do. He is only 17 TDs away from breaking the conference record. He broke the single-season conference record with 39 TDs this year. Barkley was just absolutely outstanding.
Now let's take a look at the other side of the ball. Who were your players of the year on defense, Robbie?
Well, I went with Nick Perry, the lineman from USC. He had 54 tackles, 8.5 sacks. The USC team as a whole only had 30 sacks, so he accounted for almost 1/3 of their sack total. He is a huge body up front. He led the Pac-12 in sacks and was tied for first with those 8.5 sacks. He is a big body, and he, again, another player that we can end up seeing on Sundays, guys.
I went with Michael Kendricks, linebacker from Cal. He was fourth in the Pac-12 with 8 tackles a game, 88 total tackles. He has played a key role on a Cal defense that ranks 27th nationally and has held 7 opponents to 15 points or less this season. Michael Kendricks, a big reason why Cal's defense was able to stop so many opponents this year.
I like Chase Thomas, linebacker of Stanford, 6'4", 239 pounds. He's been very good for them. Built like the prototypical linebacker. He's not the kind of guy that gets a lot of sacks, although he did have 8.5, which ranks second in the Pac-12. Reminds me a lot of Patrick Willis, a sure tackler. He can stop the run, and I think he's going to translate over well to the next level.
Some of you may remember our panelists picking the winners of Pac-12 matchups each week, and as you know, we were keeping track of correct picks. Robbie came out ahead of Pierce and Ben with the best record overall. And as the winner of our lightning round, Robbie has prepared something special for our audience. Robbie, take it away.
Well, Austin, for my little FaceTime for winning, it is the holiday season, so I prepared a little spin on a Christmas classic, so here it goes. It was the time for a bowl season, and all through the West, the Pac-12 teams were waiting to show they're the best. As the bowl games are announced, teams and fans waited in fear as they knew that the Pac-12 football had had a rough year. While Oregon State, Wazoo, Colorado, and U of A were warm in their bed, Oregon will have visions of roses prancing in their head. With USC ineligible and Barkley set to leave, USC's fans are beginning to grieve. But Pac-12 fans should hold their heads high, as this bowl season they will give their teams will give them a chance to shoot for the sky. As to what to my wondering eye should appear, but 7 bowl-eligible teams to lead me to cheer. Now now ASU, Stanford, Oregon, and Cal, on Washington, on Utah, and on UCLA. No matter what bowl, these teams can stand tall. Now dash away, dash away, dash away all. Before I send it back to Austin, I would like to say that these Pac-12 teams won't have an easy way. But if they play their best football, I have no doubt they can send their opponents home all in a pout.
Well, Robbie, that was quite impressive. Maybe you should go into child book writing instead of doing this show. Now, guys, to wrap up our show tonight, I gotta ask, looking back on the football season, what surprised you the most? We've still got Ryan Finley on the line, so Ryan, we'll start with you. What surprised you the most this season?
That's a good question. I think probably the fact that Arizona State struggled as much as they did. I would have told you before the season I thought ASU was going to go 10-2, be ranked in the top 10 nationally, and Dennis Erickson would be a hero up in Tempe. To see them fold the way they did, especially with Vontaze Burfict becoming a little bit too much of a live wire toward the end of the season, that surprised me and disappointed me. I was expecting a more competitive Pac-12 South this year before ASU struggled the way they did.
Vontaze Burfict, preseason All-American. I think he regrets this season almost as much as Robbie regrets singing that poem a second ago. It was absolutely unbelievable how undisciplined he was after last year's performance, benched from a couple games by Coach Dennis Erickson. I thought he could be the linebacker that Terrell Suggs was for this program. He wasn't able to get the job done, and I think his talent is there, but he needs to be disciplined. That's why he's still a top prospect in the NFL draft.
My biggest surprise as well was ASU dropping their last 4 games. While it seemed like they were in perfect contention to win the Pac-12 South, go on to face either Oregon or Stanford or Washington or whoever came out of the North. ASU not able to get it done on the road at UCLA and Wazoo, cost them big time, and now they're going to play Boise State in the Las Vegas Bowl. Another key surprise for me was Keith Price coming out of Washington. He is going to be the quarterback of the future of the Pac-12.
And for me, it was just the sheer division that was made between the North and the South. The North emerged as a powerhouse in this conference. The South, which we thought was going to be led by ASU, you mentioned, Pierce, has really fallen apart, and we talked about the coaching changes earlier. Just the division between the North and the South was my biggest surprise.
Well, we've come to the end of another episode of Pac-12 Chalk Talk. To stay connected with the Pac-12 Conference, be sure to follow Chalk Talk on Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe right here on YouTube. For Ben Haber, Pierce Bly, Robbie Baker, and Ryan Finley, I'm Austin Controlis. Have a great holiday season, and we will see you in January.